Hello there.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going. I I'm good frustrated.
Good,
It's-
frustrated? I think that's a good synopsis of all software development.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey, Tara. How you doing?
Good. Burning up already.
I am out in California, and I think it might get up to 100 today.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 90 something right now.
Oh, nasty all across the country. Well, how you guys doing? Did you get your homework assignments done? You feeling like a little bit more confident with React?
The homework assignment, I had to go back and watch how to, because when we did it in class, like we opened up a terminal separate, but like when we did it when you showed us at the end of class, we opened it, we started the project differently than the way we did it in the beginning of class. So I went back and I watched the video and I did it the way that we did it in the beginning of class by creating the folder. Because at first I thought we were supposed to duplicate, remove the node, like how we did the second day. But then I was like, all right, cool. That's not what we're supposed to do. After I read it, we're supposed to start like brand new. So I went back to the video and I went and I did it the way that we did it in the beginning of class versus opening a separate terminal and dropping it in. I think like you were gonna show us that at first and you were like, oh no, we can just do it this way. And I kind of like that way better. So it's there and I removed like the header information. So that's as far as I honestly am right at the moment. So I'm starting from that, but I got I did the npm start, got the React to open up in the browser or whatever. And
Cool. Yeah, so you're over halfway there, right? So the next step is get that input showing up. And then the last one is what React concept do we need to take what is typed in there and then get that to show up on the page. And so step 4 is one where it's like, oh, just get whatever's typed up to show up there. And it's really like 6 lines of code that you need to do all of that. So step 4 is like the sleeper, right? Like that's the one that it looks like, oh, I'm on the last step. This should be pretty easy. And then you have to do all of the state stuff.
So when I was naming, when I did the PW and I did the CD to put the input the name, I put state space property. So state space project or whatever it was.
Sure.
But now the state is showing up and I can't figure out how to get back in and edit it to put the dash and like put it all together. So it's like, because I'm sure it's not showing up because I put the space. Does that really matter or no?
No.
I would like know how to get back and like edit the name, but I didn't think I would start all over again and like delete it and do it all over again to get it to show up like that. But
you can just the name. You can just rename the folder in Finder and that will let you re-edit the name. There's no like npx command to edit the project name. But all you really need to do is rename the folder and that will rename the project for you.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I think with me, I think I went too far or somehow I got confused because like I got like you could type in. Yeah, I have a little drop down. Like, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
So I got this where I could type something in here.
Yep.
And but I don't know what I did for like, I don't even know why I have a submit.
Yeah, went a little too far there. Switch me over to your code and I'll show you what's going on.
And I was also I get confused on terminology. So I just named a bunch of stuff that I was like, what is this? I got confused myself in that, but.
Okay, let's dive into that a little bit. So what do we have going on here? we've got two things in state. Let's clear up terminology, right? State is just a variable, so it just has data in it that we want to display to the end user. So whenever we have data that's going to update or change that the end user is going to see a piece of it at some point, we use state for that. So what are the two pieces of information that are showing up to the user? One is that we're typing something in, right? And whatever they're typing in, that's a variable, that's data, that's in state. The other thing is that when we hit this add item button, we want to keep track of all the list items because those are showing up to the end users. Those are also in state. But we can strip a lot of this back because let's think about the homework assignment. The homework assignment just says be able to type something in here and have it show up in an H1 down here. So in order to do that, we can take out this whole is it done, right? Because we're not keeping track of is it done. We're only keeping track of what did they type in. So we can take all of that out. And we can also take out this whole map because we don't need to keep track of multiple things. It's not an array. It's just that single thing they're typing in. So we can take all of that out as well. And we don't even need this button submit or even the entire form. All we need is this input. Now, let's talk through how this is working. We can take out all of this because this is how it managed the submission. And then this is the array, and we don't need to keep track of multiple things here. We're only keeping track of what they've typed in. So this is everything that we need. So let's talk through what this is doing. We imported useState. useState comes right from React. Now the computer knows what useState is. Then we come down here, and there are three pieces of information that we always use with useState. One is the value that is storing the text. So this is what is actually storing the letters that got typed in. Okay. But because with state, we can't update the state directly. We can't just say good text equals this new thing that got typed in. We have to use this. And this is historically called set, and then whatever the name of the variable is in whatever the variable name is in the state. And then the last thing that we do is we say, hey, both of those things are coming from useState, and I want the variable to start out as an empty string, right? So that when we type letters in, it knows, hey, I'm going to save this in a string. So it does all of that. It's like, I'm going to keep track of useState. I'm good to go. I know how to set it. It's starting out as an empty string. Then we need to attach our input to the value, right? So we take our good text from here and we say, hey, the value of this input is going to be good text. Great. Now the computer is done. So what do? We click in that text box, and when we change that text box, an event is going to happen, the event of typing in the text. So we get out the value from that event, and we say, hey, take whatever that value is and set it into good text. Well, where is good text coming from? It is coming from our set up here. So it's going to take whatever is in these parentheses, set it into our good text, and our good text is going to store it right in our good text. Because of that, this will update the value of the input.
Okay.
So the last thing we need to do, the only thing that you're missing is, well, what was the last step? Make that show up in an H1. So we do an H1 just like normal. And then we go, wait, good text is some JavaScript, right? So because it's JavaScript in our HTML, we need our curly braces. And then what do we want to show up there? We don't want the letters good text to show up, but because it's in the curly brace, it will take whatever the value of good text is and show up over here. So we type ABC and we get ABC showing up in our H1.
Okay.
So the only thing I didn't draw through was we have our values linked here. The event happens, which we take the value out of. The value gets into set good text. Set good text comes from our use state. Our set updates good text. The good text not only updates the value, but it also goes, wait a second, you're updating state with the set. Because of that, good text is not only used in that value, it is also used down here in this H1. And because of that, because we are setting the text, we not only update the value of the input, we also update the value inside this H1.
Okay.
At this point, I would be disappointed if one of y'all didn't have questions about that.
So whenever we're doing state, we always have to set that second, always have to put set for that second variable.
Yes. Because we aren't allowed to say, like down here, what is natural to do is be like, oh, good text is now going to equal the event target value. This is not allowed in React state. We aren't allowed to do this. What we have to do instead is use that set. And that is how, because we're using the set, it knows to update the value and also the H1 down here. Natasha.
Hello. I have a question. So usually when I'm working with my one-on-one, I'm sorry, you can hear the kids playing in the background. When I'm working with my one-on-one, we have to put things in a certain order because you want to execute that code first. So in this situation, would you be putting the H1 good text at the bottom for that reason? Because it's like all complex and you kind of want to save that for after you run the code before that. Does that make sense?
It's a good question. Yes, it totally makes sense. In React, the order that the code runs is not as clear as vanilla JavaScript. So really what's happening is this runs first because we're saying, hey, set this up in use state. Then run second is this input shows up and it's pulling the value from input or from the state.
So it's running in order that you put it in, basically.
For now, because the third thing it does is it goes to this H1 and it says there's nothing inside good text because we started out as an empty string.
Right.
So we're done. Then what runs fourth? Well, this on change happened. So this on change goes and does this set. This set, number 5, updates the good text, which means number 6, it updates the value here and the H1 down in here. So because of that, whenever we do this set, basically what is going to happen is this return is going to rerun with whatever the new values are that we set in here and here.
Got it. Okay.
So it goes, and sorry for hijacking your screen, Sequota. It goes 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Oops. 5, 6, 7.
Wow. That is a very descriptive explanation. Thank you, Max.
Now, I would not I would not expect you to be able to answer that on a technical interview. Like that is a very in-depth way about thinking about this, but it is a really good thing to point out, hey, React's a little different here, right? Like React is gonna react to the data as you're updating it. And that's one of the whole reasons it's called React, right? Because when the data changes here, we just expect our HTML down here to react to the changes that we just made to it. So that's how I like to think about it. The return is what's going to show up to the user. The state is what the variables are that are going to show up in that data. And then these onChange functions, whether they're declared inline here or up here, are what the user is going to interact with that is going to update the information down here.
All righty. I think I'm good on that. I'll take it further in my one-on-one. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? And it's okay if you're not this far along. If you want me to go over creating a new React project, that's totally fine. If you want to go over something we did in class, that's totally fine. Whatever you guys are feeling, I'm here. You guys take the office hours wherever you'd like.
If my React times out, do I just go back into my terminal and hit the npm start again? Okay.
Yes. And then Control C, not Command, but actually Control is what you would hit to stop the server. So Sequota, sorry, I'm still hijacking your screen. This is what it looks like when it's running. If we hit Control C, you'll see it gives me this back. That means that it's no longer running in that terminal. So if I refresh over here, it's going to say page not found, site cannot be reached. So to restart it, we just want to make sure that we're inside the state practice. So if I said PWD here and it had me in the day 3 folder instead of down in the state practice folder, that means that npm start isn't going to work because we have to be inside state practice. So because of that, because we are inside of it, we can do npm start and it will fire right back up without any issues.
Okay. Oh, I got it. Okay.
Quick run through, Natasha, in terms of keyboard shortcuts or in terms of what? You're on mute.
Sorry, I had to leave the room and go to another one. My charger is at the desk. But quick run through on maybe the project startup itself.
Sure. Yep. Okay, so let me get my screen cleaned up here. Okay, so first things first, we always start in the terminal, whether we're starting in the terminal in VS Code, starting in the terminal in built into the operating system, doesn't matter, we start in the terminal. First and most important thing to always, always, always remember about the terminal, we are always in a folder. Now you're looking at this and you're like, what do you mean we're in a folder? When I'm in a folder, it looks like this. This doesn't look like a folder. We are in a folder in the terminal, and that folder is called our working directory. Directory folder means the same exact thing, right? So in order to figure out what our working directory is, in other words, what folder are we running these commands in, we say pwd, print working directory. We hit enter, and it says I'm in my users folder. To prove that, if I go to Finder and go to my home folder, this is what my home folder looks like. Well, if I come over here and say ls for list, it's going to show me all of the folders that I see over here. Okay, how do we change that? How do we change our working directory? We hit CD, change directory. And then we've got to decide, where are we going? Well, I want to get down to my desktop and my C5 my code. So I'm going to say CD desktop. And it doesn't look like anything happened, but if I say PWD, it shows me I am now in my desktop. Well, I happen to know that my desktop has my C5 my code in it, but if I didn't, I could LS again and it would show me all the different files on my desktop.
Wow.
So from here, I'm going to CD into my C5 my code. And I'm using autocomplete here. So I'm saying CD space, I type in C5. And because the only file on my desktop is C5 my code, there's nothing else that starts with C5. When I hit tab, it's auto-completing that in for me. So if I hit enter on that and now run my LS, I now see all of my weak folders. So I'm going to go one more level deep, but say accidentally I wanted to go back up to my desktop. I can say CD space period period and hit enter. That moved me up out of my C5. So I was down in my C5. Now I am back up at my desktop.
Is that
So
like
when-
a Command Z?
It's less of a Command Z and more about go back up one folder level. So there is no Command Z in the terminal when you've run that command, as Tara now knows. Once you run that command, there is no, oops, let me cancel that and go back. There are ways to delete whatever that command did, and there are ways to do it, but CD ... is less of an edit undo and more of a let's go back up one level.
Okay.
So I'm going to go down to my C5 my code and I can CD multiple levels deep. So I can actually go right into my week 13 with a slash. And now when I PWD, I'm down in my week 13. Okay. Now that I'm finally here, I'm down in here. I can prove it because I can LS. Now, I don't want to put this in day 1, day 2, or day 3. Let's make a new directory. So MK for make, dir for make directory. And now I can say office hours. And you'll notice what happens here. I have my office hours folder, but I'm not in my office hours folder. I just made the folder. I didn't click into it in the terminal. To do that, I'm going to CD into my office hours. Now I'm all the way down in the right folder. Pausing there for any terminal questions. Okay, so now that we've done all of that, we want to tell Node Package Executor, NPX, to create a React app. And now we've got to name it. So we are going to create our React app called example. I'm going to hit enter on that. And it's going to think, and it's going to take a minute, and it may ask you if this is a command you've never run before. Do you want to hit Y to install it or to execute it? You hit Y, you hit enter. It goes through, and you'll notice it created a folder for me called example. And inside that example, not only do I have my package.json, which is going to show me all of the things that this is installing, it is also in a minute, on my slower internet connection here, going to create the SRC folder, which has the app.js. It's going to have the public folder. It's going to have a bunch of different stuff in here. So this is what we now take this example folder. We go into VS Code and open that up. And this is where we have our SRC and all of that stuff. So we have to be careful here. And this goes whether we're in terminal in general or in terminal in VS Code. I think, okay, I'm good to go. I run my npm start and it throws a bloody fit and it goes, what is npm start, and gives me all of these error messages. Well, that is because I am in my office hours folder right here in my terminal. If I PWD, it's showing me office hours here. Well, I could have 19 different React projects in my office hours. My actual React project is inside this example folder. So I need to CD into my example. And now when I run my npm start, it's going to think about it and then gladly get me started here. We can also see that over here. Because I am right-clicking inside my example folder, it knows when I run my PWD down here to print my working directory, what VS Code has done for me, because I right-clicked on the file here, it knows where to open my terminal. So it opened my terminal all the way down in the example folder. Because of that, I can run npm start here, and it will fire everything up fine. We use Control-C to stop it, and that way it's not running in the background. And let me show you a common mistake. If I, instead of opening my example folder, I open my entire office hours folder. Okay, well, all of our code is here. There's no problem editing our app.js and all of that. But if I go and open my terminal, you can see I am in my office hours folder. I am not in my React project folder. Because of that, I cannot run my npm start. So what I need to do, I have two options. I can either cd into my example folder and then run my npm start and everything will be fine. Or, and this is achieving the exact same thing, I can close out my terminal, right-click on example, open an integrated terminal, and then do my npm start because I'm in the example folder, and that will also work.
Thank you.
Is that
for
A
that.
to Z enough, or A through Z and all the emojis? and
That was
numbers?
A through Z, plans A and B and all everything in between. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And this is all recorded too. So if you need to like go back and pause it as you're going, that is totally fine.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you just did that last part because I kept CD, I kept PWD. I could see that I was in like my main file, like my desktop, like I wasn't in any folder. And then I kept trying to see, I changed the name. I right clicked and I changed the name on the state practice folder from state to state practice. And it kept saying in the terminal, it couldn't find it. It couldn't find it. And like, I was like, why can't you find it? So I kept going back and looking at the file. And I'm like, okay, am I spelling it right? And it kept saying I couldn't find it. But then I
The
just did what you did and I right clicked it and I closed the terminal, right clicked it, opened it up, and then went to npm stuff. But it just said it could not find it.
So here, did you put a space in the folder name?
It did not.
So that's the only thing that I can think of. There are two things. One, when you rename it, the VS Code and terminal both can get confused because they're like, wait, we were in this folder. Where did this folder go? So sometimes that's the problem where if you just like close out of it or CD up one folder and then back down to it, that can help. The other thing you want to watch is you'll notice whenever I name files, I mean, going all the way back to day one, I never put a space in it. That is because spaces wreak havoc in the terminal. So if I say, hey, I want to get into my office hours, one trick we can do is open that. I meant to open my regular terminal. If I CD and I'm like, you know what? Finder knows where the week 13 folder is. Why do I have to type in this whole path? Well, if I type in CD and you cannot forget the space, if you don't put in the space before you drag and drop, it's not going to know what you're trying to do. But if we do CD space and drag and drop this in, it's going to put that whole path in there for me. So no matter where I am in my terminal, if I hit enter, now I'm PWD to the right spot. So I'm going to say, all right, I want to get to my CD office hours, right? So I CD to my office space hours, and it's like string PWD office. But it's right there, right? Well, CD is confused because it's like office. There's no folder called office because the space makes the terminal think that's a different command. So what we do instead is we say CD office, and then we do this / backslash. I always mix those up. That is a /. So that is the key beneath delete and above return. Then we put our space in, and that is called escaping the character. It is saying, oh, no, this isn't another command coming. There's actually a space in the file name. Treat that space as if it were all part of the folder name. And so now when we CD into office hours and PWD and LS, we can see everything in there. So that's why we avoid spaces, because once we get into the terminal, the spaces wreak havoc unless we put that / in to escape it.
Okay, cool. I wish I could have showed you that it's not showing. Now that I got it open, it's not showing me the error messages, but I wish I could have went back and showed you what it, oh, well, I closed the terminal. I wanted to kind of show you what it
All
was.
good.
But yeah, that makes sense. All right. I just had to put that in my notes. So it's a / space.
Yes.
If I ever put a space, but just try to avoid the spaces, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why you'll see I always do like dashes or underscores, because as a developer, there's nothing more frustrating when you like really get going with the terminal and you're feeling good about CDing and you know like how to move everything around. And trust me, that day does come eventually. But you get to that point and then you're like, there's someone else will name their file with a space in it, and you're like, stupid little, I gotta put the / in and escape it and all of that. So you will see developers oftentimes will escape out or avoid spaces just because it's easier to do dashes or underscores, or even camel case it. That works too.
Thank you.
No problem. Great question. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? Welcome, Shannon and Allie. I know you joined us a while ago, but I didn't say hi. And to you as well, Rain. Well, I'll stick around for a couple more minutes in case anyone has questions or capstone, or doesn't even have to be anything we're doing. Could be like, hey, this thing in JavaScript has always been a concept that I never really got. Can go over that. Otherwise, I will let you guys get back to your weekend.
So Max, with our homework this Sunday, being that
Mhm.
we have to go along the lines of what you've been covering and React, so our project has to be a to-do list as well.
No, good question. So we're creating a new project from scratch. We are deleting not all of the contents, deleting out all the stuff in the header for the app.js. We're making a input show up, and the input is just regular HTML that we put in our return. And then we need to use state to link that to our input. And when that state gets updated, it should take whatever is getting typed into the input and making it show up in an H1. So we don't need a form. We don't need a submit button. We don't need to keep track of items in an array. We don't need to map over any of that array. Those are all things we did in the to-do app, right? For this one, all we need is that input to show up. That input needs to be linked to state. And when that input changes, the state needs to update so that it shows the correct thing of what got typed in the H1. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but to be honest, other than that one line of function, I just don't see where I went wrong. But
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
share. Do you want to share your
one-on-
screen? We can take a look.
No, one-on-one would be fine
Okay.
for me. Yeah.
Sure. And the other thing, Rain, I think you came in just a couple minutes late, which, obviously no big deal. It's an optional meeting. But I went over it with Sequota's code. So once this posts up onto YouTube, you can watch that and see if that helps get it. And if not, one-on-one is totally fine.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep. Last call for questions.
I got a quick question. I answered it on the quiz about the controlled and uncontrolled
Oh, I didn't really go over that in class, did I?
components, but we didn't. I was about to say that. I Googled it and I kind of understood like where it was saying like the control with using the value and the unchanged, because those are kind of things that we went over. But I just was wondering if you could kind of go over it like
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. So you kind of hit the nail on the head. Let me share my screen. Close out of that. Okay, so we have seen, you know what, it's probably going to be better for me to open day 2 to do. And if I look at our car example, this is where we were just playing around with things. We had, oh, I guess we didn't do it in here. Okay, so 2 things. One, we can always do a regular input type text. This is what is called an uncontrolled input, because React isn't controlling it. It's kind of letting the browser take care of whatever gets typed into it, right? The problem with an uncontrolled input is we don't have access to the value and the on change. We don't have access to what gets typed into it in React. So the way we have to do that, if it's uncontrolled, and this is the very non-React way of taking care of this, we can say on submit equals form submitted. We can do our const form submitted, which gets the event. And then in order to get the input text, we have to say event target elements and then input name dot value. And we give this a name of input name. And this is officially an uncontrolled component. In other words, we're letting the browser keep track of it. React doesn't have control over what gets typed in there, how to clear it, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay,
Any
so
questions on that?
when we add like an event to it, it doesn't change it from an uncontrolled to a controlled? Since
The event, it's the on submit event does not make it controlled or uncontrolled. However, the on change event on the input itself makes it controlled.
okay,
So when we say, hey, now we're going to do our input value and our set input value, and we say use state, and that comes in as an empty string, and we start this with a value equals input value, and then we say on change equals event, and the event sets the input value to the event target value. Now this is a controlled input. And because of that, we don't need to dig in through the event elements input name value. We can just console log out input value. And that, because we're updating the input value here and we're showing the input value here, we can just use the input value here because React is controlling that input value through state.
okay, that makes sense.
So it seems like a very minor thing, but controlled just means that there's a value and an on change on the input itself. And uncontrolled just means that it's missing these two, which means that in order to get the uncontrolled value, we have to dig through the forms elements to get that value out.
Okay, got it.
And we even saw that just a tiny bit we used it on day 1's code as an uncontrolled, right? This input doesn't have an on change or a value, so it's uncontrolled. So we had to go through the elements to get that out. But Jen asked on day 2, well, how do I get that text input to clear out? Maybe day 3. Yeah, it was day 3. Okay, now in our to-do, in order to be able to say, hey, after you add an item, I want this item text to be cleared out so I can add another item. Well, in order to do that, we had to change our input down here to a controlled input with a value and the on change.
Mm-hmm.
So now that React is controlling the value, we can update the value and it will automatically clear it out for us. And you'll notice that now that we have access to the item text in the use state, we are able to use that item text here when we created the new item.
Okay. All right, yep, that makes sense. Because I was still thinking that even when we added the event outside of the function, that it would change it from an uncontrolled to a controlled, but it's literally the value and the unchanged that determines if it's controlled or uncontrolled.
You got it exactly. You could technically say that this form is now controlled, but the inputs in it would have been uncontrolled but are now controlled. But normally when we think about controlled and uncontrolled, we mean the specific inputs, not just the entire form.
Thank you for explaining that, because I like Googled answered it, but I was like, I'm gonna ask him to kind of go over this because I don't really, I know we kind of looked at like the values and the unchanged, but I'm not really, can't really like define it like myself, like without help. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep, totally. Great question. Any other questions?
We're covering more React on Monday. I'm just asking because I'll be on a plane. I have to go to the Bronx for my job. My new contract starts Monday.
Oh,
So-
nice. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. So is this gonna be more React on Monday?
More React on Monday. We are going to start with probably the chat messages app. And what we're going to be going over is like, how can we create components in separate files? We're going to get a little bit more practice with props. And we're going to start building an interface kind of from scratch in React. Chat app is one of my favorites because it's like we keep going back to it. We keep on adding more and more to it. And then the other thing we're going to do is the Owen Wilson API that we did in vanilla JavaScript. We're going to look at how we do that in React.
Oh yeah, we're going back to that. Okay. All right. Hi, Allie. I see you just logged on too, by the way.
Any other questions? Allie, we appreciate you soaking it in. This has been a great office hour session. Really good questions, really good review. Whenever I get to the end of office hours, I'm like, oh, I want to recover all of this stuff in class. And then I'm like, all right, but there's only so much time. So really awesome questions. Thank you guys for asking them. As things pop up, definitely shoot me a message in Slack or schedule one-on-ones. Otherwise, have a good one. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the heat, if there is such a thing as enjoying the heat. And I will see you guys on Monday.